Hey everyone, my name is Brian. After many years of building with Angular, I'm here to help you level up your skills and build better apps. A couple of years back, I showed 4 ways to listen for events in Angular, but Angular moves fast. So today, we're updating that playbook for modern Angular with the latest, cleanest ways to handle browser events. Whether you want simple clicks or global events, you'll see it all, plus a bonus technique that makes state sync easier than ever. Okay, let's get started. First up, we have basic event binding. In my previous tutorial, I mentioned that this should basically be the default way to listen to events, and only if it doesn't work would you need something else. And this is still true even in modern Angular. It can easily be added anytime you need to react to a click, a focus, a blur, or any other event along those lines. All you need to do is simply add parentheses with the event name inside. In this case, we are listening to focus, blur, and input events on this text box. When any of these events fire, we add a message to our messages array. So when we focus in the input, we see a message for the focus event. And then when we blur, we get a message for that event too. And then when we type in the text box, the input event fires. This type of event binding in Angular is simple and effective, but it won't always work. Sometimes you may find that you need to bind to events on the host element of a component or directive. In my previous video, we had this host listener directive. Now, I'm not sure how realistic of an example this is because all it does is listen for a click event on the host and then emit that event. It's really basic, but in that tutorial, we used the host listener decorator to listen for those click events because that was the right way to do it at the time. But now, the host listener decorator is no longer recommended for use. Instead, we should use the host metadata property on the component or directive. In this object, we bind to events just like we do in the template. We use parentheses with the event name. Then we can just call our function and pass it the event. And then we can remove the decorator and its import. This is the modern way to listen to events on component or directive host elements. Here, we're currently using this directive on the submit button. And when the click event from the host is emitted, we add a button click message. So let's save and see how it works. There, we can see the button click event fires like we'd expect it to. So don't use that decorator anymore. This is the new way to do it. Now, something else that we were doing in this directive was using the output decorator and an event emitter to emit this custom event. This is because output and event emitter were the standard for custom events. But now it's all about the output function. So we can just switch this to the new output function. Then we can remove the event emitter because it's no longer needed when using this new function. Other than that, it basically stays the same. Just use the emit function to send out the event. We actually had this wrong in the original example. Okay, let's save and make sure this still works correctly. Nice, clicking the button still fires. So don't use the old output decorator and event emitter anymore because they've been replaced with the output function now. Okay, now what about listening to global events? Well, let's look at our example component again. Okay, when we need to listen to global events in Angular, we can still use the renderer2 class and its listen method like we're doing here. I had this commented out so that it wouldn't fire while showing the other events, so I'll uncomment it so we can see it in action. The idea here is to use the renderer's listen method, passing in the element you want to listen on. In this case, the body. Then we pass the event that we want to monitor. In this case, it's click events on the body. Then we pass a callback that will run every time the event fires. In this case, a body click message will be added. When listening to events like this, though, we have to handle the cleanup manually to prevent performance issues, which is what we're doing here. So now, if we save, whenever we click anywhere in the body, an event fires. This is more of a rare situation in Angular and really should be used as a last resort when nothing else will work. Okay, now we have the new kid on the block, model inputs. Think of this as two-way binding for the modern Angular era. To add this concept, we'll add a value property using the new model function. And it'll be typed as a string. Let's jump to the template. We'll add a template reference variable to grab the current value. Then we'll wire up our input event to keep the model in sync. A model input is like an input and an output in one. So it keeps the value in sync between the parent and child component. So if there was a value coming from the parent, it would flow through like an input. And then when we change the value in the child, it gets emitted back up to the parent. So here we also need to bind the value of the text box to the model as well. Now let's switch to the root app component where this component is included. The first thing we need to do is add a property here. Let's call it form value. And it will be a signal initialized to some default label. Okay, now we can use two-way binding, the banana in a box syntax, to bind to the value model input. It's important to note that when using two-way binding like this, we don't include the parentheses for the signal. Now, there's a slot in this component between the form and the list of events. So here, we're going to output the value of this property so we can see how this works as we interact with the form. Okay, that's all we need. So let's save and see how this works. Now, when the app is initialized, we can see that the value of this property is passed to the child, just like a standard signal input. But now, when we type in this field, the value emits back to the parent and updates the property in the parent too. So, just like that, you've got a value that flows smoothly between parent and child, updates reactively, and feels right at home in a modern Angular app. So now you've got 5 battle-tested ways to handle events in modern Angular, whether you like it simple, modern, or just a little fancy. If you watched my original video, now you've got the updated edition, complete with new syntax and a bonus modern approach. Let's recap. Standard event binding. Simple and works in most cases. Host events now use the host property instead of the old decorator. Custom events use the new output function instead of the old decorator and event emitter. Global events can still use render too, but should really be a last resort. And then we have the new model input, a modern two-way binding concept with signals. If this helped you out, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and check out my other tutorials to keep learning. And as always, you'll find the code and links down in the description below. Until next time, thanks for watching.